right there. Everybody, wait a minute. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right. Well, all right. What's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like live right here at I Mix What I Like, a little SNL, little Saturday Night Live. Welcome everybody who's able to join us live. Peace and welcome to you, and to those who will be seeing this later on. Peace and welcome to you as well. Please do all the things: like, share, subscribe, put this in your socials, and let's have some fun. Get into a couple of things. And where did I see? Yep. Live and direct. I don't think. I can't pull it up, but I saw earlier that Silberg, you had asked what did Chappelle say now, and nothing. In fact, in some ways, that's where we'll get into some of that. But I got some coffee for myself, Manny. And this is some good. This is a special infused edition. Uhuru to you as well. Peace. Priestess Tapes. That's a dope nickname. What is the good news? No news is good news, right? What? Now I'm curious. What's Priestess? What tapes? What is the tapes reference? Mixtapes? You a DJ? So tonight, I do intend, as always, to have a little bit of fun. But the goal, but there is sort of the theme or the thread this evening is a liberal counterinsurgency. I mentioned it on Saturdays with Renee earlier this morning. Please do go check that out over on Black Liberation Media, and check out the Saturday house mix Ear Doctor pulled up with this morning too. That was a nice surprise. But a little bit, and to be honest, I've been struggling with how I would want to order, as usual, with organization and how I would want to order what I want to do this night. But the theme is liberal counterinsurgency. And I'm actually going to play it in its entirety, the 9-minute clip that I put together that I posted earlier today. But I want to play it tonight for anyone who hasn't seen it, but also to just situate us for, in particular, one clip that we're going to watch later that I've been struggling with how to interpret it but for really everything, including a little bit of when we look at some of the discussion that DaveChappelle had on Saturday Night Live, and also recently on DrinkChamps. Although I feel like they must have taped that a while ago, but it was released over just maybe a couple of weeks ago. where DaveChappelle was with Blackstar, Yassine Bey, MosDef, and TalibKweli, and others. And I did finally sit down and watch it. And but yeah, so liberal counterinsurgency. Shout out to Dylan Rodriguez and Millennials Are Killing Capitalism for as far as I'm aware, and Orisami Burton for as far as I'm aware, leading sort of the conversation around that subject. But actually, I don't know if I'll even get to everything tonight. We'll have to see how the energy goes and the time goes. But and then in commemoration for my former fandom, for the team now known as the Washington Commanders, who are now apparently doing well. I said earlier I like that they are renamed the Commanders, because then this becomes kind of relevant. So I got my Washington commies on. I think these were printed by conservatives, to be honest, I think, as a way to sort of, drag the name, but I actually like it. So it's several years old. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so they just reposted it. Okay. Because when I looked up the album they were talking about, I thought I had known it was out for a while, and yeah, so okay, but that's fine because we can make belated use of it. Um, uh, but yeah, I thought so. I only saw it posted because they only reposted it or whatever a couple weeks ago, and I never had seen it. So, but yeah, but thank you, Stephen, for that clarification. I thought so. It makes sense. But all right, but where I do want to start this evening is with some news, and shout out to Quaker Anarchist for alerting me to this. Wanted to bring this up in case anybody hadn't seen this. Oh, I didn't mean to bring it right to this tweet, but yeah, this is Quaker Anarchist telling me about uh, this story here. Hold on, let me bring up the actual story from Electronic Intifada here. Electronic Intifada's AliAbunimah arrested in Switzerland. He is currently being detained and has had access to legal counsel. The arrest came one day after Abunimah arrived in Zurich for a speaking tour. He arrived Friday, was questioned by police for an hour before being allowed to enter the country. His arrest appears to be part of a growing backlash from Western governments against expressions of solidarity with the Palestinian people. Last year, several activists and journalists in Britain were arrested, raided, or charged using counter-terror powers. These include Asa Winstanley, an associate editor with the Electronic Intifada, whose home was raided and his computers and phones seized. Winstanley has not been charged with any crime. The Electronic Intifada team stands in solidarity with AliAbunimah. Speaking out against injustice in Palestine is not a crime. Journalism is not a crime. And certainly agree with that here as well. And obviously encourage folks to keep an eye on that. And obviously we will too. And whenever any calls are made or anything, we will of course, spread the word as well. So yeah, wanted to start with that, and then just trying to see something here. Okay, all right. Similarly, Similarly, I thought we would, if I can just borrow from what Brother Netfa does with Voices with Vision all the time, thought we could check in very quickly here with Mumia in a new prison radio commentary. How do you create an institution that dehumanizes, incarcerates, and destroys the soul of 10,000 people? So let's check this.
An institution that dehumanizes, incarcerates, and destroys the soul of tens of thousands of people. How do you do that? And you don't like undo that by in your last week giving more commutations than any other president in history. I think you have to look at these as systems of predation, right? That have fed rural communities for generations in the punishment industry, the so-called penal industry. But you have to recognize, first of all, that it is an industry, right? I think that, maybe his advisors told him that history will not look kindly on this mass incarceration. So in his last week in office, he tried to decarcerate, he would have, been in the history books for the greatest number of commutations, because I think history will have to tell both sides of that story. This thing was devised by, in large part, a man who was born in a rural community in Arkansas. And I'm speaking of William Jefferson Clinton. And born in Hope, Arkansas, rural as can be. But what he tried to devise largely succeeded in enriching rural communities for literally generations. And that was the federal support for state prison building and extended stays in prison beyond what was the norm when these things got developed. But here's the thing, Clinton did that. And when he needed these people that he helped the most, and when him and his wife needed it the most, when Hillary needed it to win her election, they, by at least the high 90s, they turned their backs on the people who gave them this largesse. And they went for Trump, And, here we are now. You cannot create workers who work in the punishment industry and expect them to be thankful for the gift that keeps on giving, the gift that feeds generations. This is a mining community, just like Greene County in Pennsylvania. They were mining communities, and they were dying mining communities. These people have the new mines. The new mines are the prisons. And they are eating steak and buying new cars and building new houses and getting cable and satellite dish reception units for their TVs. And they're living the lives of Riley because they're making an incredible amount of money, far more than their grandfathers made in the mines. The state can always outpay private industry. These commentaries are recorded by prison.
It's crazy. And again, shout out to Prison Radio, and it's amazing that Mumia still sounds so lucid and is still so correct in his analysis, and so clear. All right. Similarly, so I was really, this is where I was So, all right, let me just do it this way. I'm going to play in slightly elevated speed this clip that I put together from a couple of Professor Dylan Rodriguez interviews that we had done on the liberal counterinsurgency. And because, as I said, I think what he says here sets the tone. The link is in the show description. I'll add others later on, but I did want to make sure that's in there. And so if the slightly elevated speed becomes an issue, or you just want to replay it, or just have it as a starting point or a quick summary, I'm going to be using it in my classes, which is in part why I put it together. But I really put it together in. So I'll come back and say some. So in a few minutes, I'm going to play a clip of something that I was struggling with, and someone else reminded me of the approach of the frame of liberal counterinsurgency to understand what was happening and how best to interpret it. So then I went and spent several hours last night putting this clip together, because I wanted something that, out of, and since we had done these great discussions, which are linked, the full discussions and more are linked in the show description as well, with Dylan, and I like his approach so much, I thought we would just use this here, and then you'll see what I'm getting at in a minute. But here we go.
That's the whole point. This is why I appreciate your platform among a select few others, is not just welcoming disagreement and debate, but stoking it. That's what liberation struggle is supposed to be. It's like, let's understand what our differences are and whether they're irreconcilable ones or not, and then also whether there's a way for us to mobilize through and around each other, even if we can't resolve those differences. I mean, this is the problem we're in, and this is also the problem that the social justice industry apparatus, including and especially the academic version component of it, wants to squash. Right? Like to squash this. It's sad that these apparatuses that we often rely on sometimes fail us, but we just need to talk about that. We need to call that out and just have an analysis of it. The entire last hour and a half that we've been talking about is an extended discussion of a particular iteration of liberal counterinsurgency. Mm. That's both the phase and the method of domestic war that you and I have been talking about for these last 86 minutes. Right? I'll say liberal counterinsurgency. So counterinsurgency itself takes on a kind of liberal format by its own description. I'm talking about the U.S. Joint Forces description of counterinsurgency. Right? If you read it. But this is something we talked about collectively, is how the directives around counterinsurgency, if you read it, they have as much to do with trying to win people back into reinforcing and participating in the relegitimation of state power.
Message!
With trying to win people back into reinforcing and participating in the relegitimation of state power.
As it did with, militarization of repression, right? And in fact, it said the former should be more prominent than the latter, because in a weird way, it was this kind of weird Gramsci hegemony kind of thing under the conditions of colonial occupation, which is not really hegemony, right? So I want to say that, but like what we're talking about in this conversation is a domestic iteration of the same thing. Because this is the thing that we haven't talked about, but which I think is lurking and haunting the background of our entire conversation, that there was mobilizations against anti-Black violence and state violence that were liberal, that were seeking participation in the apparatus of the state and even the Democratic Party in particular. And then that we're going other directions, including anarchist directions, self-determination directions, militant, I'm going to call it self-defense directions. So there's a proliferation across the spectrum that's happening that, in a broad sense, is raising the question about whether the particular state form that we inhabit in the United States is a legitimate one. For many people, it was raising that question. For many people, it was answering that question in the negative. Like, this is a state apparatus, a form of state power that is not legitimate. We have no reason to tolerate it, and we need to radically oppose it. This is how liberal counterinsurgency works. Like, you actually have now, you have an anti-race movement that's monetized, that takes the form of various organizations that are all about restoring the legitimacy of state power, and actually by calling on it, by demanding it, a piece of it, and so forth. And this is proved over and over again, right? But y'all going to see, like, this is not. There's so much evidence that lays out how these particular organizations and this movement in general it's wedded to a call for alliance with the state. That's what it is. Alliance with the state, alliance with the so-called carceral and policing state in particular. It advances the agenda of trying to reconsolidate state legitimacy in the face of challenge, as always, from Black radicalism. I've said this so many times, and I'm gonna say it again here, that Robert Allen, as far as I'm concerned, is the person who came up with the concept of a nonprofit industrial complex.
Yeah.
I think I wrote an article that basically was a tribute to Allen's work, in which I named it as a nonprofit industrial complex. And so there's a weird way that I get cited for that all the time. Like, oh yeah, Rodriguez says NP. But I say it over and over again that concept is a direct interpretation of Robert Allen's classic, indispensable book, Black Awakening in Capitalist America. It is a must read. And it's not only because it names the kind of emerging foundational moments of this configuration of state officials, of police, of liberal philanthropic foundations, of think tanks that were literally, I mean, in an extended and relatively open way, were collectively conspiring to figure out how best to repress Black revolutionary struggle in particular, right? But in a broader sense, anti-colonial, counter-capitalist and anti-capitalist struggle and other forms of revolutionary worldwide and localized struggle in and outside the United States. It not only names that, but the other interpretation that I've been pushing lately is what Allen's work does is it actually gives us an understanding of what soft counterinsurgency is. This is domestic counterinsurgency. And I've been saying this frequently also. Folks need to go to the U.S. Army's, or whatever the website is. They need to download that free PDF of the 2006 update of the U.S. Army's field manual on counterinsurgency and read it. Read that shit. It was rewritten in 2006 for the ground war that was going on in the so-called war on terror in Afghanistan, et cetera, right? But you read that book, the U.S. Army's book, Counterinsurgency, and you read that alongside Robert Allen's account in Black Awakening in Capitalist America. And what you realize is this shit is not new. Right, the 2006 notion of counterinsurgency being waged on the war to win hearts and minds and to do all this other kind of culturally oriented and politically, I want to say reformist kind of tactics and strategies to kind of exert U.S. authority and legitimacy in the occupation, in the ongoing war in Afghanistan and elsewhere. A lot of those ideas are already reflected in the period that Robert Allen is talking about in the mid to late 1970s into the early 1980s, in which this configuration of state officials. There you go. This configuration. Right one, right? That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Okay.
Yep, that's the one. Take a look. Right. You'll see it. That this is what Allen is talking about: is soft counterinsurgency. How is it that you can pick people off who otherwise would be inclined to get engaged in grassroots revolutionary struggle? Right.
Wow.
How do you pick people off and incorporate them into certain forms of academic research initiatives? Right. Electoral campaigns, philanthropic foundation. Grants and fellowships. So the roots of the Ford Foundation Fellowship for, so-called, I don't know what they call it anymore, right? But it's directed at so-called underrepresented people in the university and college and academic community, right? That's one of the prominent, products of the period of counterinsurgency. So as far as I'm concerned, Robert Allen is kind of one of the foundational thinkers in helping us understand this emergence, these last 30 to 40 years of soft counterinsurgency that we see happening all the time. I mean, we see it happening with what seems to be the lightning quick incorporation of grassroots rebellions.
Message.
What seems to be the lightning quick incorporation of grassroots rebellions.
Grassroots radical abolitionist and proto-abolitionist rebellions being very quickly incorporated into these neoliberal networks of foundation funding, of philanthropy, of punditry. That leadership gets identified and they get put forward as the representatives of a grassroots insurgency movement. Why? Because that's the way you contain it. Right? You turn it into something that's represented by an identifiable set of individual people, of individual leadership, and now you can contain it.
Now listen, that's called my boy. You know nothing about that.
Right? And this is how counterinsurgency works. That was the point of what happened in the 70s and in the early 80s that Robert Allen maps out, right? That's literally what that extended kind of set of conversations among philanthropists and state officials and police, and elected officials. That's what they were doing. Like, how do we go about identifying or even cultivating prominent individual figures from these different oppressed communities, especially Black communities, and make them into the spokespeople. How do you engage with this kind of this deeply colonial and anti-Black and chattel logic of individualism that is actually part of a long-term as well as a focused and tactical counterinsurgency to stop in not even
seriously, if there's a better, more succinct explanation of that somewhere in I know Dylan has given many interviews. If anybody else has edited it or if he's put it together or discussed this, I couldn't find anything that was more succinct. but I just think with the edits and all of that, it just. But big salute to Dylan Rodriguez. Yeah, indeed. And so what made me what was really the driving force behind that, at least me putting that together, it was this clip here, because I had gotten a political prisoner alert about Imam JamilAlAmin, who we'll come back to in a minute. And in the process of trying to catch up with what was happening, I found this clip, and I needed some help, you know. Tahir, patience, you just showed up, bro. What you in a hurry for? You showed up late and now trying to drive the bus. Chill. Dang. Here we go. This is the clip here.
We talked a bit about off camera about the American human rights activist JamilALAmin.
JamilAlAmin, yeah, free JamilAlAmin. And there's an organization. I'll post it on the site. I'll make sure you guys have it to post too. JamilAlAmin is formerly known as HRapBrown. You know, some say he gave us the rap. I want people to Google these people you hear me name and talk about. He was convicted of killing 2 sheriff's deputies, but there's a lot of evidence to say he's not the one that did it. There's even people that are saying he's not the one that did it, that are known and close to the scene. I say
so already you see the contradiction. Those who pay any attention to me at all know there's this ongoing issue that has arisen with it's not that it's even ongoing, but that had arisen at one point. But this is where I've always been conflicted, and where I've always felt a need not to engage certain people that I know or don't know, celebrity or not, with their public facing politics. So in other words, when people are going about their lives and their careers and can make references like this to people like Imam JamilAlAmin, in general, I think this is, I would, for the most part, either suppress what I actually feel about that, which is actually liberal counterinsurgency, or just kind of feel like, hey, they're doing the best they can do. It's when they try to set the parameters for an analysis of political prisoners, Al-Amin or anyone else, or for what the struggle to free them or anything, or to interpret their situation, but that, or what the rest of us should do. That's where, again, I've only ever felt a need to engage to whatever extent I do. So prior to any of these last few years of engagement, I would have felt very differently. But when I saw this, I said, okay, so here's the contradiction of KillerMike with all that he has been saying or not saying recently regarding his silence around Cop City, or his tacit advocacy, where he at one point even said, "What are you going to do? They got $100,000. You can't stop it." His general defense of police and his positive reference to his family in policing and this, that, and the third. His defense of Black business and Black capitalism as solutions. And as we'll hear, there's some more in just a minute. But I'm thinking this is again. Well, now with the proper language and frame, this is ultimately conscious or not. This is not even an accusation. It's not even personal. But what ends up happening is the liberal counterinsurgency, this whole thing of who becomes the spokespeople for these people, these movements, these struggles. And then what are they advocating more broadly, which then does impact how people who hear about this interpret, frame, develop an analysis, and may move or not, and or offers legitimacy on liberalism by such reference to something more radical. So it's okay. All right.
This, because this means a lot. Former Mayor Andrew Young, who was a confidant of Dr. King and organized with Dr. King, has also called for the freedom of JamilAlAmin.
Right.
See, so this is what I'm saying. And obviously, definitely from the perspective of the Imam, that's a good thing. You want as many people as, I would think you would want as many people as possible saying, free, get me out. But aside from that specific point, what is the broader impact politically when Andy Young becomes connected to free this or that political prisoner? And then what currency, political or otherwise, does that confer upon them in spaces like this or elsewhere? And or when dealing with people to their left, when certainly from the public perspective, they can say, I defended JamilAlAmin. Why are you, what's the issue? By the way, as I made in my own notes watching this, I say the same thing in reverse. As someone who's been long in defense of political prisoners, why then all the unprincipled engagement with me? But I digress.
JamilAlAmin is still alive. He's getting older. They have him all the way out, I think, in Arizona. I've talked to his son. He could come home. He could come home because he's old. They could grant him some kind of clemency to come home and spend his final years. They could try to exonerate him of the crime, but if that takes too long, let's just get him home. Whoever becomes president next, I think that part of our focus as Black society should be repaying some of the people that have put a penance in for us, that have made sacrifices, that have been martyrs. Every martyr didn't die. MumiaABuJamal is still alive. Leonard Peltier, Native American, now is still alive. Mutulu Shakur got to come home, but he got to come home in enough time to spend a few months with his family and die. We should allow these people the dignity of being around family when they die.
Again, who can argue with that? And who wouldn't want someone with Mike's access making these points? Generally speaking. But again, well, the liberal counterinsurgency component is really what's at play here. It's because what are Mike's politics at the end of the day? What are Andy Young's politics at the end of the day? As Rodriguez was pointing, it is a return to the confines of the state, the Democratic Party, very comfortable responses to these very real problems. So it's, anyway, yeah, it's wild.
Not in a supermax prison in 23 hours. JamilAlAmin, as HRapBrown moved to Atlanta, started a mosque in the West End, cleaned up an area that was riddled with drugs and violence, created a community where not only Muslims, but regular everyday Black folks will be in that community and feel safe and feel cared after. When I talk to that brother, man, he calls me about twice a month, sometimes more. The first thing he says, "Assalamu alaikum, brother Michael. Walaikum again in return." He said, "Have you read your surah?" He'd give me an assignment, Surah 12. So if y'all out there now, just go online, read Surah 12 in the Quran. But he said, "Is there anything I can do for you?" I say, "Man, you've done enough. You fought for my freedom. You fought the U.S. government. You came home, fought with other Black folks that wanted to be Scarface and made sure we had a clean community. I'm going to spend the rest of my time, or your time here, fighting for you. I would like for you to be free. I'd like for you to be able to return to Atlanta, to return to the community that you helped to grow in the West End, and to return to the love and embrace of your friends and family." So I just like to say, Black people, as we fussing and fighting and arguing over who's submissive, who dominant, who this and who that, and let's spend some time fussing and fighting on the behalf of somebody who's put in the work for us.
Absolutely.
Because I think that that's something we could do. I talked to Miss Kathy Hughes.
See, again, this is So first of all, I mean, straight up, I have never been in contact directly with JamilAlAmin. So salute to Mike and others who have done that letter writing and the kind of direct engagement that I and others have not done, or at least in sustained ways with this particular political prisoner. That's fantastic. But everybody he's talking about is the same black capitalist promotion, black bourgeoisie promotional campaign. So now it's Andy Young and Kathy Hughes, who, again, as Glenn Ford pointed out many years ago, she led the way in destroying black radio news. And as he said, let them eat talk. She paved the way in commercializing and then black radio and reducing the capacity, the political and analytical capacity of her audience in so doing, by bringing in the white ad revenue, the corporate model, the playlists, the payola. I mean, and then she gets to be brought in and referenced as part of the solution, as the leadership. That's why that's how she could come to Morgan State in 2007 proclaiming that Radio 1 is black power. This is the antithesis. So it's just, but of course, by the way, I got this video from the free JamilAlAmin campaign. So, and I'm not hating on that. I'm just pointing out that what for me is this massive contradiction. Even if it could be argued that this is politically to the net positive, I actually don't agree. I know it sounds terrible for me in my privileged space to say that, but for the collective, I don't think having Mike be the spokesperson with these particular references is a net positive for maybe anything, certainly nothing beyond freeing the imam. So, and maybe that's all it needs to be. But wow, this okay.
Of Radio 1, and she talked about us being enough in this country. If 1 million of us just gave $10 a month,
see,
toward the people who have put in the work for us, toward the people who are like a.
So then I would, and then he's about to drop Assata Shakur's name. So again, here we go back to a version of the buying power argument. If 1 million of us put $10, but so where's the campaign for that? Where is the KillerMike Kathy Hughes led campaign to collect $10 a month from 1 million black people specifically for distribution to political prisoners, as he's arguing here? I mean, again, these people, she has the biggest commercial radio and television, black commercial radio television network, or had. I don't know if it's still. He's got a tremendous audience. He's a Grammy Award winner. Why haven't they done that? If he's sitting there with CamNewton with 1 million+ subscribers on his YouTube channel. Why aren't they doing it then?
Shakur in exile now in Cuba. Who's taking care of? It took the owner of Little Caesars to pay Rosa Parks rent her last few years.
So again, we're back on the mythology that our heroes have to be saved by black business people, and that black business people or business people in general are saviors. This is not the analysis doesn't match the focus
of life, and we don't have to be like that. So in our arguing and in our trying to figure out who the new leaders are, let's make sure we're taking care of our old leaders. So for me, I know a lot of the brothers from the woke and activist community and stuff, if they don't know me personally, they may be suspicious of me for whatever reasons, but I know Brother Kalanji of RBG, who's organizing right here in Atlanta, every single day. I know that brother loves and respects me, and I know he's one of the brothers that got me and Tip and Trey New Face aware that JamilAlAmin need to be free. So that's the mission I'm on, and that's the mission I would like for Atlanta and beyond to be on. These people that have served 50, 60, 70 years in prison, that are 70, 80 years old now, They don't have to be in a maximum security prison anymore. They should be allowed to come home. The same way when we invade these other countries, we'll free their leaders because we know it'll calm and quell the people in some of the rebellion. We should be demanding that at home. These people have served their time.
And they're not a threat to society.
They're not a threat to society anymore. The most they can do is inspire a black person to know I can, I must, I will. So I want to see that brother free, and I'm going to yell it from the highest mountaintop to the lowest valley, and I would challenge any politician that's running to be a part of the campaign to free JamilAlAmin, bring him home.
And of course, so the note I did right here is that that's not a shout out. It's a confession. He's snitching. And that this collage of names could be thrown together in this way is not what one should want. And then I did right here, and what caused our conflict? My disagreement over their black capitalist approach. That's it. And then what would his approach be to free Imam Jamil? Appealing to the black business and capitalist class? So again, by being able to interpret this through the frame of liberal counterinsurgency, it makes sense because so I've been saying somewhat differently for a while now that one of the biggest problems facing us today is not the absence of an awareness of certain subjects, it's the frame of those subjects and the narrative built for those subjects. So, you know, unlike decades of the past where the problem was differently engaged, there's no shortage of black visibility. But there is also no shortage of an assumption that that black visibility is black power. And that's what Kwame Ture was trying to warn us against, that black visibility is not black power. And then when we look at Robert Allen's work, when we look at Dylan Rodriguez's work, and Dylan's not, I mean, you know, I don't know if it's like a Filipino don't crack either or whatever. Like people, I don't, you know, Dylan may not be, I don't know how old people think or not he is, but Dylan, starting very young as an intellectual, has been dropping gem after gem in the academic world for a long time. And he was right. He has been associated very much so with the nonprofit industrial complex approach and critique, and his analysis expanding from Allen's is brilliant. But whether it's within academia or elsewhere, there is this liberal, soft counterinsurgent replacing or replacement of who get to be the spokespeople. So, I mean, I would think that, especially given what happened after that meeting that was put together with T.I., KillerMike, because I wasn't there, but I've heard what happened at that meeting. And I don't know that Mike is accurately representing what happened at that meeting or the order in which the time he spent, the way he engaged. I don't know that everybody who was at that meeting would agree. The fact of his being, if I heard correctly, the last in, first out of the meeting. But again, what I think is of value would be a question of, well, who then are you looking to do work around political prisoners or anyone else? And why would anyone want to be associated with that particular list? Again, what caused our conflict was me saying to Mike Andy Young is the antithesis of Dr. King. When you keep saying Young from King, you're misrepresenting their relationship and certainly their politics. That's what led to our conflict. It wasn't as if I disrespected him or did anything, or it was me being critical of that. So to not be critical of that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't mean you can't be cool with or friends with, but how could you? So absolutely. Were any of these situations reversed or had anything gone differently, and he was on a public platform and saying, and by the way, I should even start before that. What really started the conflict was when he held up my book next to Walter Williams' book or Thomas Sowell's book, one of them. And I would say, you got to pick one of the, like, we're not on the same team. Like we're not, and just, so without drawing, but you know, but look, so when you, and I'm not sure if I put it in there yet, but I'll make sure it's there. But when you go to the website that came through in my political prisoner news alert earlier today, and you see that there's a call for emergency medical transfer. This is important to note. So I hope that the Imam gets all the help he can get. I hope that someone sees that KillerMike interview and says, let me tap in and get involved. But I do worry that the liberal counterinsurgent element of it, it's again sort of what I was saying about when, as we'll get to in a minute, popular rappers connect themselves both with radical politics, but then with just, standard commercialism, it diminishes their impact politically. When Colin Kaepernick does his kneeling campaign, but then does the Nike commercial, this is not to personally condemn them, and I understand the decisions, but I do think symbolically, politically, it does have a liberal counterinsurgent effect of conveying that the state, its dominant corporations, are here for us and can be brought in to help us and make the change that we want without any uncomfortable upheaval. And I just don't think that that's sound analytically. But anyway, so I went here, and we can come back and I would encourage people to donate. But then I went. There's another link there that leads you to this campaign that is also raising funds for a true crime docuseries. They're collecting money till this time next year. And I thought we could just check out this trailer.
A man who pulled up in a Mercedes opened fire, killing Deputy Ricky Kinshaw.
Convicted of murdering a Fulton County deputy, JamilAlAmin.
A militant and civil rights leader, HRapBrown.
HRapBrown emailed JamilAlAmin.
You're either free or you're a slave. There's no such thing as second-class citizenship.
Violence is a part of America's culture. It is as American as cherry pie.
Fight the power!
The FBI had a 44,000-page file on him and his community.
The Constitution is the very document that enslaves African Americans.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
I've been incarcerated for a crime that I did not commit.
Convicted cop killer fighting for his freedom.
Brother JamilAlAmin, we support him.
Maybe we should look at this again at trial.
JamilAlAmin did not shoot any police officers.
You weren't arrested for it, were you?
No, sir, I was not.
In fact, another person was tried and convicted.
JamilAlAmin, yes, sir.
The confession has never been mentioned in a single trial of Al-Amin.
We're here calling for the freedom and the exoneration. Every man Jamil, Al-Amin.
It's a man's life, it's his freedom.
No such thing as justice in this country for black people.
Don't you ever forget his name.
We will be free by any means necessary.
So yeah, and I'll make sure the links in the show description. I encourage people to if to the extent you aren't, we should all tap in some more. And I hope to whatever extent that I'm wrong here, and that I hope the liberal counterinsurgency does not take effect, and that people do not connect Mike or anyone else's politics, CamNewton's, my own even, to anything that stops them from moving to the appropriate political position to help actually free him and others. And I'm assuming, I mean, it was a Vimeo clip, if that's what you're referring to. So, and again, maybe at another break or when I wrap up later, I'm not sure. I don't think I put the link in the show description. I'll put it in, and you can see it and the places to donate to the medical and to the film or the docuseries. So yeah. Okay, let's see. Any other notes that I'm missing? But yeah, again, just one last point about that Mike CamNewton clip. That again, I keep thinking of what Dylan was saying, that the immediate use of a movement to side with the police. So the contradiction of Mike's silence around Cop City, and remember, by the way, that was literally the point that he said to stop communicating with him on when I reached out to ask him for his comments on that. And then his insistent narrative that black business, black capitalism, Andy Young approaches to liberation, the John Hope Bryant approach to silver rights, is all of that is about restoring state power. None of them are into challenging the state that is the font of these problems. That is, and maybe some would challenge that argument, but is the organization of these problems, I guess we could say, at least, and is leading to the incarceration of Imam Jamil and up until recently Peltier and Mumia and whoever else. That's the all right. So okay. I think that's it. I think that's it on that. All right. So with these approaches in mind, I do want to talk a little bit about Chappelle, both most recently and this couple-year-old thing that was on DrinkChamps. Now, I'm definitely not messing with, you know what? I didn't even read this article, but I'm just going to use it for the graphic. I don't know what the Atlantic said about it, but so Chappelle, first of all, I have to say, Chappelle, I mean, I do think his comedy is brilliant. I don't think his politics are right. I don't like the hanging out with Elon Musk. I don't like some of even what I think he tried to slickly get away with on the monologue. I don't really, all of that. Okay. But I think it's undeniable his buildup, the effortlessness, at least as it appears, that he can weave these stories and have these punchlines that seemingly come out of nowhere, but still, I mean, he's really good at that. But man, does he defend? I have no idea what it's like to have this kind of money, but he loves defending being rich. And it comes across, I can't help it having it come across as a defense of the bourgeoisie and the fact that there is a rich that's rich. When he did his I'm ugly routine to explain away questions about how or why he could claim that he was not at any of these Diddy freak off parties, despite knowing all these people who were there. And then him turning it into I'm too ugly to get invited. I thought that was a brilliant way of avoiding any serious questions about who your friends are, or were you really there, or what did you do, or not know, or any of that kind of stuff. And it was funny. And then the thing he did to tell the story about how he happened to have been in that region of the world when Jimmy Carter at one point was visiting Palestine. And he saw Jimmy Carter walking down the street and all these Palestinians were just cheering him while, because he had just written that book comparing the occupation to apartheid, and the Israeli press was condemning him, but the Palestinians were praising him. And Chappelle said, I don't know what that means, except that he must be a really good dude, really good man. And I thought, again, given I'm watching it and I'm saying, given the stage he's on, the amount of people watching, I mean, the video had like 15 million views just on YouTube alone, or that one clip alone. So, I mean, his ability to weave in between all of those various politics and backgrounds and people watching to get a point across like that was pretty slick. But then I immediately went back to what I'm saying tonight is that Dylan laid out for us, is this liberal counterinsurgency. And it becomes like a political version of the Vernon philosophy for me. That as soon as I start to hear something that is appealing or funny or appropriately political, whether it's KillerMike talking about Imam Jamil or Chappelle talking about, in his own way, a defense for freeing Palestinians, I'm reminded of the context. And then what comes after that, and the behavior and the analysis that comes after that, and the public performance and statements that come after that. And all of which leads us back to, as Dylan said, the Democratic Party. At best. And a severe limitation on what we think politically is possible or should be our analysis. Then, admittedly, being a little confused about the timeline, I did tune into this DrinkChamps episode, and I do want to try, see if we can get away with playing any of this. I just got a couple of very, very short clips.
This is bad.
I tried to sneak in here without getting in trouble, because the white owners of all this black media get really litigious. So on the one hand, so they had apparently flown out to Dave's place in Ohio. They're having a great time. And on the one hand, admittedly, I'm thinking, the child version of me is loving this. No, hold tight, hold tight. I think we're gonna get away with it. Primates are. I think we're gonna get away with it. And I'm watching this, and again, I'm thinking, man, this is dope. The 20-year-old me watching this would have been perfect to be able to have a sort of an almost live window into hanging out with these cats. Or this is what it feels like to be in a room, blah, blah, blah. And they're talking about the camaraderie and the friendship and the memories. And I'm getting, it's like, and I can imagine if you're drinking and smoking, it'd be like, oh man, all the emotions, you're getting all whatever. But then they kept saying things that kept shaking me out of those moments. One of them, wait, which one did I just pull up here? Well, we're about to see. But one of them that I think we're not going to play is that when I think it is connected. It is connected. So part of one of the issues that they kept bringing up was that came up, at least, not kept coming up, but was this issue of them putting out the latest Blackstar albums on alternative platforms that you couldn't just get on any mainstream platform. And they were saying, one, it was about protecting their artistic freedom, making sure they got properly paid. They didn't want to, get plugged into the machinery of the industry through Spotify and YouTube and Apple, like and they were talking about they were at points of their career where they were able to do this, and they didn't have to put out art anymore. They're basically saying they're rich enough, they're accomplished enough, they don't need to do this, they have the freedom to do this. And then they kept kind of saying they kept walking up to a line of saying our real fans will find us and the real ones will support us. Because this is an unjust industry, as they pointed out. And and this is where I felt one of my points of disappointment, and I would have loved to hear someone push a little bit on this point, that what is the exact nature and organization of the industry that puts you in a situation where you feel like this is your best alternative, or that you feel like you need people to come find you? Because they said a couple of things along the lines of, our real fans can find us. It's not that complicated. It may not come up. We're not on Spotify, but you can find us over here. But they didn't say anything along the lines. Ooh, was I going to do that tonight? But they don't say anything along the lines of an actual discussion of the modern day music industry, how it's organized, how it's determining of popularity and destroying careers or ripping off artists, or they don't go into any of that. They kind of leave it just on the precipice of blaming fans. And I was disappointed by that. I felt like these cats, if anybody, should be able to better articulate and demonstrate for an audience, yo, we made this decision because this is how the industry is set up. This is how it's been ripping people off. This is how it works. This is what we get versus streams here versus why we would get what we get over here. This is do. And instead of saying, because part of what they leave out, and let me see if this is let me just play this and see if this is the clip that I pulled up. Now let me just let's just see real quick.
Backpack. No, I mean. Okay, let me tell you what the outsiders looking in.
Okay, my bad. Okay. They're talking about, and I have pulled this up. All right, I'm going to come back to that last part. Sorry about that. I did get out of order here. I'll come back to that last point in a minute. But this is... Where did I put the link? Oh, yo. Okay, hold on. Oh man. I didn't. Where did I put the link though? If it's not here, where did I? All right, I need to pull this picture up because just in case some of you are not aware, Nori is asking about this cover here, this sort of famous or infamous source cover with. Can you all see this clearly? With Pharaoh Monch, who I think is the GOAT, Black Thought, and MosDef on the cover of the source. And what Nori is asking about is, well, let me see if I can, let's come back to that. That's what he's talking about.
Backpack hip hop is at the forefront now.
I guess, but you know, I mean, even that.
You remember the cover? I'm talking
But
about.
even the backpack culture never accepted that terminology either.
It was like it's something that people came up with to try to like, you know, I get what people.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there just so. But this was another part that kind of bothered me about, and I'm sorry, I'll come back to the other point. But if folks remember, this issue of the backpack rappers in the mid to late 90s and maybe early 2000s really became an issue, and that cover was one of the primary movers of this debate, that this sort of conscious rappers, the backpack rappers, were and as Nori said, we, the gangster rappers, thought that the source putting you all on the cover at that moment was meant to convey that the new order was in town, that the conscious backpack community was. And really all they talk about is how they didn't really want that moniker. They didn't really, they just sort of say that we didn't really accept it, and then they go in. Most goes into a story about how Buckshot, you know, was upset because as a thug and as a gangster rapper, he actually used a backpack and didn't want to be that, you know. But there was no, again, elevation of the discussion. These are folks who are maybe not as old as me, but they're older MCs. They're brilliant MCs. They are intelligent, experienced men in the game. There needed to have been more of a discussion about how media and genres themselves historically in music were evolved and developed for the purposes of marketing and division and for political neutering. And that this is, again, it would have been great if they had paid attention to Dylan Rodriguez and could talk about it in the context of the liberal counterinsurgency, that if you can convey radical politics onto even MosDef, TalibKweli, and Pharaoh Monch, then you limit the potential revolutionary messaging and analysis and frame that might go out into the community who, as Dylan Rodriguez was talking about, was looking for solutions to state power and to an unjust state imposition. So it doesn't matter if we or anyone thinks backpack rap is good or bad. The point is the attempt to label it and to create the genres and the difference was something inspired by the corporations and the ruling elite that own the art, that own the industry, that definitely have, back to Rodriguez's point, a political desire to neuter, to use a soft counterinsurgency to replace truly radical analysis with something that looks like it, or that you can call that without it being that. And this is not, again, my point would really be that rappers are not supposed to be the political leaders of a revolution. So But the attempt to label them as backpack was the attempt, I think, of the state to do that, of the industry to do that, to say, don't read anyone else or don't listen to them. You can get all your radicalness from this backpack community. So I would have liked them to say a little bit more about that as opposed to just saying we didn't really want the label. But that's in part of the point. The label wasn't created, it wasn't self-driven any more than hip hop as a musical category was self-driven. Or jazz as a musical category was self-driven. He also went on to say, did Nori, that the video for the Roots, They Do What They Do, it divided the community. And he said he was watching it with Nas and that Nas thought the video was a critique of him. But what it was doing was being a critique of the gangster rap in the industry, but it was happening from artists also within the industry who were not conveying then, as artists within the industry, how the industry is doing the promotion of the gangsterism versus anything else. And then it comes off as you're making fun of gangster rappers, and then you're pitted against them when, again, it's much like what we were talking about on Renee's show earlier today. It's the state intervening with the propaganda and the narratives and all of that, pitting people against one another. And then, of course, the Roots become the epitome of this and of the caricature and of the contradiction by their role on Jimmy Fallon. All right, so I will play this other clip because this was another part. I think it's related to that point that they said that I
your own thing. You got to be a conscious consumer. You have to.
So again, they're talking about how do you gotta be able to come back to. In other words, when they were being asked how, why did you put your music on this other platform? They're saying, you got to have some. Let me bring it back. You got to have some, some responsibility. You have to be a conscious consumer. And again, I don't think that he even understands how he's literally speaking Nielsen marketing. I know it's, but okay, that's the context.
Your own thing. You got to be a conscious consumer. You have to. You don't have to, but it would be wise to be in charge of what you take.
Okay, so I'll just leave it at that little bit of a clip. That going back to where I started, this was what I was saying was my little bit of an issue, that you can't blame the audience and the consumers for not knowing or thinking to or finding your music when you move consciously off of mainstream spaces. It may be that you're right, but to come back at saying you all have to have the responsibility instead of couching it and framing it, because they don't, but the link to the whole thing is in the show, will be in the show description, so you don't have to take my word for it if you want to watch the whole thing. But my point is that by putting it back on the so-called conscious consumer, saying you have to be a conscious consumer and be more responsible for what you take in and do better to find, meaning in the context of what he was saying, do better to find our work despite it not coming up on your dominant platforms. I'm saying that misses the point. And why I thought it was funny is because Nielsen calls it the conscious consumer, because they're playing on age-old marketing strategies targeting Black audiences by saying, again, much like the liberal counterinsurgency, if you just tell Black people that you are concerned about them or just have some Afrocentric symbols or adornments, or adorning your door or whatever, your window, whatever. If you do all of that, then you'll get the Black consumer. In other words, the conscious consumer is a marketing strategy, it's a construct of an advertising community, of a psychological warfare, of a liberal counterinsurgency community. So the idea that conscious consumer in the way that Talib means it would exist or be likely to exist is missing the point, and that they're not taking or able to take the moment to explain any of that there. I just thought, and then I'll just for the safety's sake leave it there. But they go on to talk a little bit about, as rappers, being careful about what they promote. And Yasin Bey talking about his conversation with Pusha T at one point, saying basically stop promoting crack and gangsterism. But again, it's the industry that does that. It's not a self-driven decision by the community. And it does frustrate me that part of the conversation doesn't get centered or even mentioned when and everything is left to you all out there. Make the right decision. Do right with your art, do right with your media consumption, and just do right. And all the structural, and that's where it becomes, again, part of this counterinsurgent effort, this seemingly radical, seemingly thoughtful mechanism that brings everybody back into a non-rebellious state. And they're dope. I mean, this is not, by the way, when they had a whole conversation about Kanye West, and they brought up, and I thought, Yasin made some good points about the importance of Kanye, this, that, and third, and his talent, this, that, that, and he made a reference to the track Barry Bonds. I hadn't heard that track in a minute, been listening to it for like all day. That track is vicious. We out of here, baby. Here's another hit, Barry Bonds. Like, that's it. I don't have anything else thoughtful to say, but other than to say that even when you like it, much like the Vernon philosophy in media, gotta be careful. That's when you should be more critical of it. All right. Still got a little more to go. Hope everybody's doing well. Please do like, share, subscribe, support the platform. Put this in your socials. If you have comments or questions, drop them in there. I will come back to them or hopefully, or you can drop them in later. We'll come back to that in a little bit. But yeah, I did have that set. You know what? Let me keep that same energy and sort of kind of demonstrate a little bit of what I mean. So I watched this one of the channels that I do watch is this very popular Fantano guy who I'm sure some of you are familiar with. And I watched this particular discussion. Spotify doesn't want you to see this, with the author here, LizPelly, of a new book called Mood Machine: The Rise of Spotify and the Costs of the Perfect Playlist.
Hot
and I would like to at some point. Wait a minute. Hold on. I got clips for this. Hold on. And I wanted to, admittedly, I was thinking of doing a whole separate thing, but it fits for what we're doing tonight. That this is just, again, I told you so. So one of my arguments, similar to what I was just saying, that I did not see in the discussion on DrinkChamps, that going back to I mix what I like, and just before that is that borrowing from other people's arguments, that new technology does not change social relationships. So the advent of the internet and digital music and all of this was not going to be a help to artists. It was not going to help us get a new media environment. It was not going to help us get anything that we would want. And a lot of people disagreed. A lot of people argue, no, if I'll be able to sell my music directly to the people. I won't have to have the industry. I'll be able to circumvent this and circumvent that. But much like what happens with cryptocurrency and blockchain and anything else within a settler colony and capitalism, there's always going to be consolidation and accumulation. So, of course, just like in crypto, there's going to be a consolidation around mining, around exchanges, and of course, who has most of the coin, as is the case in music. There's always going to be a handful, an oligopoly around platforms, ownership, etc. Whether it's the analog hard copy of records and tapes and CDs, or whether it's digital, and the reason for that is immaterial. I think has as much to do with maintaining public opinion and manipulation of, again, a liberal counterinsurgency, allowing for the proliferation of certain forms of celebrity and popularity and branding and spokespeople talking about very real, serious issues, but always in a way that brings back state power in the Democratic Party. Certainly we're getting that, or the Republican Party with Snoop and Nelly and all of them recently. And this interview confirms, again, a lot of what I had been saying before, what we've been arguing for a long time, even recently. And one of the issues that they address is just that, consolidation. So let's see if I can play just a little bit of this here.
The first of which, I kind of see like three big tiers of the industry at this point, and they're the record labels, you have the streaming services, and you also have the distros, you know, like DistroKid and, you know, kind of the middlemen who are sort of like facilitating a lot of this, like, you know, uploading to these platforms to, you know, kind of get musicians and get people on to, you know, these various places. Do you think this hierarchy is going to remain this way forever? Because at least for me, in my view, it sort of seems like at least one of these three doesn't need to exist. And eventually at some point, as, you know, dog eat dog capitalism, you know, always gradually does, like one ends up swallowing the other. And I don't know, for me, maybe it's the distros, but, you know, who may it be in your opinion? Do you think eventually one of these three will get absorbed into the other and we'll see even more consolidation of the music industry?
Well, I think, you know, something that I talk about in the introduction and try to make clear throughout the book is that a lot of when we're criticizing streaming services or talking about streaming services, you're also talking about the major record labels who are partners in, you know, many ways to these companies.
Yeah, they are connected and they have, you know, a stake in the company as far as stocks and everything, you know, to the tune of millions.
Message. The major labels make so much money off of the streaming ecosystem. The streaming model, as we know it, could not exist without the cooperation and participation of the major record labels. So in a lot of ways, like the types of industry practices that we're talking about and message, as I write in the introduction, like it's as much about what's stayed the same as it is about what's changed. You know, the major labels have incredible influence and power in the music business. Message. Where that is not true unless there is some sort of like, you know, massive wave of antitrust action or some sort of like efforts to, you know, investigate and sort of regulate these companies. So it's hard to imagine like that not being the case. Something that isn't message is that a lot of the economics of streaming and the story of streaming, I think, could be understood as a fight for market share. And, you know, the labels and the major rights holders, because of the pro rata model in which rights holders get paid through streaming, you know, rights holders are always trying.
All right. So I actually encourage folks to check out this whole interview. Again, the links all end up in the show description. So again, consolidation. And remember, he's talking about a big three. It's Universal Music, Warner Music, and Sony Music. But then they're connected, of course, to the big, I guess, three of YouTube, Apple, Spotify for platforms and distribution. And as she pointed out, without one, there can't be the other. Just like it's been the case historically with radio, hence Kathy Hughes and her playlists and payola. And because remember, playlists did not start with Spotify. Playlists started with commercial radio, and those playlists being organized for program directors by record labels to assure a certain form of popularity, and more importantly, what would be marginalized. So, and then here comes Kathy Hughes doing the same thing, getting rid of independent local news. And here we are back with the same thing. So that was one part of it. This other part where they talk about features, I think not only makes my point about popularity and celebrity, but makes the argument that I've been wanting to make around, or begins to, there's actually two parts where they make this argument around passing political references, not leading to revolutionary analysis and conclusions, but functioning more as, again, say it with me, everybody, the liberal counterinsurgency.
So much value put on data in this environment.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest half-truths that I see all the time in terms of like the monthly listener numbers on any given artist page is like, you'll go to an artist page, you'll see they have a certain amount of monthly listeners, and you'll see the tracks that are sort of like getting them that kind of engagement. And sometimes over and over and over, it'll be features on other people's songs, and you and I as music fans know that doesn't necessarily always sort of like translate to an actual fan who's engaging with your stuff. People may be streaming that track that you're featured on because they're a fan of that artist that you collaborated with. And yet on a lot of these platforms, including Spotify, this is like showcases this is this artist's work, this thing that they featured on. And, this we sort of consider to be like a prime piece of their catalog, even though it may just be like a guest appearance, and it sort of like counts toward their overall monthly engagement with everyone, as if, something like, let's say, I don't know, a Drake feature, for example. Drake has been known to sort of like be this guy who, for a quick moment, he drives a lot of people into the direction of a certain person or a certain figure or a certain artist by having them feature on a track, and they blow up for a minute, and then, it sort of ramps down pretty quickly. And it sort of seems like, in a way, like the streaming services are kind of like also, I don't know, part of that web effect, that domino effect of like, this person has 11 million monthly listeners on Spotify, but as you say, they try to book a tour and they have to cancel the whole thing because they can't fill up the venues that they're booking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or there might just be like one track that's on a really popular playlist, and the consumption numbers might be high because a lot of people are listening to that one playlist. But who is actually clicking out of that playlist and going and researching this artist? And I think it's definitely the numbers ought to be questioned. And I think it's important to remember that like these metrics like do not equal value. That value is
message.
So again, I'm going to stop it there for several reasons, but primarily because selfishly that was the part where she makes they go one step to make this point. Metrics do not equal value, she said. And this is again my point about when people say, oh, but I referenced Biko, or I referenced Malcolm, or I referenced Betty Shabazz, or I made a reference to the white man, or to, that isn't going to lead people to a study of those individuals any more than what they're saying here is going to lead to people latching on to that particular artist who they see featured on a Drake playlist. So again, an artist getting a passing reference, so to speak, on someone's playlist is exactly what I'm saying happens with a passing political reference in a song or a movie. If it's not couched in a certain frame, if it's not plugged into a certain broader politics, then it does in effect perform the liberal counterinsurgency effort of, again, replacing spokespeople, associating everything with the state, with the police, with the Democratic Party. So there's another section I'm not going to play, but there's another part where she actually does. They have an interesting discussion about solutions, and it's literally it was frustrating to hear because it's not that she's wrong, but it's the same stuff I was hearing 25 years ago at media reform conferences, that we should have unions for artists. You got to find, much like what Talib was saying, you got to find alternative platforms and support college radio. And literally she said, support college radio and support independent radio. And, she suggests a book that people could buy to find ways to tap into your local community to bring certain artists to venues near you. Like there's a whole, and my point isn't that it's wrong to do that. It's just to say that 25 years on, this is the same thing. We went from cassettes and CDs and terrestrial radio to digital downloads, and everything's everywhere all at once. And it's the same problem. Independent artists can't be heard, radical artists can't be heard, different kinds of artists can't be heard. If you don't fit into a particular genre, you can't be heard. Can you imagine that people argued once upon a time, I don't know where to play Jimi Hendrix. He doesn't fit. I don't know where to play Prince. He doesn't fit. What? We can't play Bob Marley on R&B radio. And here we are all these years later. It's the same thing. People can't find anything that isn't spoon-fed to them. And this is why I'm saying it's become more sophisticated. So when Talib was saying what he said, like you can't condemn the audience member. It's more difficult today to find your way through all of that soft counterinsurgency in its media, in its all pervasive McLuhan-esque environmental reality than ever. But because this clips again selfishly confirms my point. Again, I do want to come back to one more little piece.
Again, reminds me of this. This is like the 2000s all over again. I feel like as the internet, that sort of piracy
message
transitioned into the 2010s, I feel like there was this new generation of artists kind of shaking things up, especially in the rap world, that like people are kind of seeing a way forward through that in terms of like, oh, this is new. This is like a challenge to the status quo. This is something different, and this is like kind of new and exciting and thrilling. And now it sort of seems like we've once again reached a place where instead of like sort of seeking out something that's like novel and different and sort of like going against the grain in some way in a broader sense, we have hit another era of just kind of like blindly accepting, well, if it's popular, it must be good, and we're sort of like, and what's kind of nefarious, even more nefarious about that with Spotify is like, we're using potentially fudge numbers to, sort of like justify, the validity of these things. At least back in the day, while obviously, the industry had a lot of control over, the popularity of music back then too. I think like, we wouldn't have something like a swing revival in the 90s without it being shoved down our fucking throats. Crazy. But anyway,
y'all remember?
At least you had to sort of like justify that popularity with physical album sales. Like these days, you could just sort of say, well, this is platinum because it streamed this many times. And who the hell knows who streamed it or how many times?
And so essentially that was the point I was getting at. It's the exact same problems. And again, I disagree with Ndugu here. You can call it a lack of imagination if you want. I would say for you, it's a lack of analysis and a lack of clarity. The digital economy does not change the set of problems and does not require a new set of solutions. The technology doesn't change any of the social relationships. It doesn't change anything about extraction of labor. It doesn't change anything about redistribution of wealth. It doesn't change anything about consolidation of ownership. In fact, that was the point I was making. I don't know if you were blatant not paying attention. And nobody said simply unionizing would solve the problem. My point was artists, even in your new digital universe, have the same problems of being ripped off. It's even it's even easier. There are still lawsuits about copyright infringement, duplication of content, royalty payments. There's still a handful of corporations owning all the distribution networks. And then one of the things they end up talking about, it's even funnier. It's like an even more crazy, incestuous environment in your digital universe where apparently she uncovers in her book a situation where music industry is streaming to an audience of bots it created. So as they pointed out, you have no humans involved in the performance or the playing or the listening, and yet money is being generated. Not for the artist, by the way, for the record label and for the platforms. So again, the problems are still here. The solutions are not. And again, this is my point, that this is what I was saying and others were saying for years, that this was not going to change any of these relationships. And to hear, going back to the previous segment, MosDef still talking about a situation where we got to stop these youngins or rappers from talking about crack and violence when we need to be talking about, that's the same problem we've been having for 50 years. Because we don't control who becomes famous and who gets the mic, pun intended. The corporations control it. It's wild. It's wild. All right. Let's see. Where are we going next? I just want to share this with you all because I thought it was funny. I did watch. I'm not going to do anything with it today. In fact, we should have dealt with it with Renee's show. But you know what? I think I just forgot. In fact, it's in my notes as something else. Dang, we should have watched this video from Legal Eagle on the end of birthright citizenship. Well, anyway, in this video, they get into all the reasons why Trump doesn't understand birthright citizenship, and he's doing something else. And I'm apologizing for not dealing with this issue properly. But the reason I wanted to share it is because in Liz Dye here, in her explanation of all of what is wrong with Trump's approach to the legal issue of immigration more broadly, but birthright citizenship, listen to this.
Amicus brief was flagged by reporter Josh Kovensky at TPM. Kovensky tracked down Ryan Williams, the head of the Claremont Institute, to ask him how he reconciled the United States being a nation of immigrants, since pretty much everyone who is not Native American is descended from people who came from somewhere else. Williams insisted that we're a nation of settlers more than immigrants. You're kind of saying the...
In other words,
message.
In this whole thing about who's supposed to be here, even the right-wing defenders of this place have to acknowledge we're settlers. We're all settlers. Well, you all are settlers. So I just couldn't help but think that was funny. The broader issue should have been dealt with within the context of Renee's show, but there's always room for more. But I will return to something that was sent me. Shout out to those who send me this stuff. And the link to what I've written about this guy previously is in the show description. But TrevorNoah had apparently this conversation recently, the corruption of capitalism, Miltonian capitalism. And I thought this was quite a revealing exchange.
These are your values.
Yeah.
But if losing money comes into the equation, you will adapt your values. So then they aren't values to me.
Correct.
That's what I always think of. So I go like, can a company actually have values beyond making money?
So you are highlighting the very problem with modern capitalism, right? The capitalism that we have today is not Adam Smith capitalism. That's not the capitalism we have today. We have a bastardized form of capitalism influenced by an economist from the late 70s named MiltonFriedman. The Adam Smith version of capitalism was that the baker selfishly wants to make the best bread so that they can sell more bread than all the other bakers. And the butcher selfishly wants to make the best meat so he can sell more than all the other butchers. And the dairy farmer wants to make the best butter so that he can sell more. And what you get is the best sandwich. What we as the customer get is the best sandwich, right?
So, of course, as he would have to do, this is a wild oversimplification. It's been a long time since I've read Wealth of Nations, but there's so much more to it, including my favorite part of The Origins of Money, which I've talked about before, where Smith talks about the origins of money being about manipulating people who don't have anything that you could bring to the table. Now, it is true. I agree with him that today's capitalism is arguably different from what Smith said he wanted, but what he's saying here about how to explain this difference is crazy.
So the selfish behavior of wanting to be better than their others benefits the customer, right? And in the late 1970s, MiltonFriedman wrote an op-ed in the New York Times where he basically proposed a new definition of business. He actually called it the responsibility of business. The responsibility of business was to maximize.
And again, remember, he was sponsored by the National Association of Manufacturers, who wanted a book from MiltonFriedman that would be the equivalent of the Bible to Christians and the Communist Manifesto to Marxists. That's deep. So in other words, they wanted the equivalent for capitalists to the Bible for Christians and the Communist Manifesto for Marxists.
Profit within the bounds of the rules. Forget about ethics.
Maximize profits within the bounds of the rules.
Right?
Okay.
Ethics are a higher standard than the rules. And you see it all the time. You know, companies did some horrifically unethical things. You know, patent to an essential drug, and they raised the price 1,500%.
Right, it's within the rules.
And they all say the same thing. We broke no laws.
Yeah.
Which is true, right? Horrible, but not illegal, right? And so in the late 70s and early 80s, a lot of the ruling classes, the CEO classes, heard this definition and went, yeah, baby, right? And they embraced Friedman's definition of capitalism, or business, the responsibility of business, and they sort of doubled down on it. And it gave rise to some entirely new behaviors and entirely new CEOs. There was
This is just from this op-ed.
Yeah. I mean, like it.
No, so it wasn't just an op-ed. It was Capitalism and Freedom, a book. It was the whole propaganda push that they write about in The Big Myth, that the National Association of Manufacturers, the ruling elite, again wanted to push this. And as you're going to see, it's a suggestion that up until the 1970s and MiltonFriedman, capitalism was all good. It also he also leaves out here that what Friedman was also part of a response to was the uprisings, anti-colonial uprisings in Latin America, the continent, and of course here in the United States. So which were, of course, responses to capitalism, colonialism, and so on and so forth. So he's skipping some things here. So this is wild. This is a wild frame.
Became a popular thing.
Wow, Milton, that's a high hit
Friedman.
rate. Well done, Milton.
I don't like Milton-Friedman, right?
Is Milton-Friedman still alive?
No.
Okay, and I you know, that deserves
message.
And normally I wouldn't want to approach it this way, but that is really revealing of what the level of the conversation, to be honest here. So, and this is why I've said what I've said previously about TrevorNoah. This is why I'm saying tonight what I'm saying about the liberal counterinsurgency and, you know, the apparent, even progressive discussion of capitalism, in other cases race and whatever, but it's in a really within the safe confines of a reactionary and backwards and unstudied politics.
Oh, okay. That's why you can say it like that. Otherwise, that would be like a crazy move if you were just like, I hate you, MiltonFriedman. And MiltonFriedman's like,
I hate his
Simon
work.
Sinek. Okay, you hate his... Oh, there we go. Okay.
Can't speak about his character,
Okay.
but I don't like the work he put out there. And so you started to see these new behaviors arise. So for example, the use of mass layoffs to balance the books on an annualized basis, right?
Yeah.
Did not exist in the United States prior to the 1980s. It didn't exist.
So again, what is he? I don't even understand what he's trying to say here. Is he suggesting that there was no labor movement problems prior to the 1980s? Prior to Milton Friedman? Prior to Ronald Reagan?
Mass layoffs were used for existential reasons. Like, oh my God, the company's going bankrupt. We have to cut 10% of our workforce.
Yes.
Really? That's not why they used mass layoffs? Are you saying that the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and the early industrialists were only firing people out of an existential crisis? That's wild.
Now it's like, we're profitable, we're just not as profitable as we promised.
You
lose your job,
Yes.
right? That started in the early 1980s, and it started to gain popularity. And then it gave rise to an entirely new type of CEO like Jack Welch, who was the CEO of GE. And he was like the poster child of Miltonian economics, where you started to see the shareholder being prioritized over the customer and the employee. You started to see shorter term time horizons. You started to see an emphasis on price of stock versus is this good for the company's long-term value. You started to see long-term greed being replaced by short-term greed. I don't have an issue with long-term greed, but short-term greed is a problem. And the use of human beings.
He said, I don't have a problem with long-term greed.
livelihoods to maximize shareholder value. And this was all because of this Miltonian influenced Jack Welch poster child that is the standard of how businesses are led today. There's nothing wrong with capitalism. There's a huge problem with this version of capitalism.
That's crazy. And his rendition of the history to support his argument is equally absurd. Again, that capitalists and industrialists and the ruling elite, everything was all good. By the way, my own work around buying power, they start with the whole thing starts with the cost of living surveys, which were coming out in the early 1900s with the specific purpose of helping the political and economic elite determine how much they could pay or how little they could pay workers to allow workers to shop spend within the economy and not rebel. So, and this was a response to what were already strikes and unions and work stoppages and sabotage and all this other kind of stuff. So the idea that everything was good up until a week ago with Jack Welch and them is just crazy.
Because I go, these are your values.
Yeah.
But if losing money comes into the equation, you will adapt your values. So then they aren't values to me.
Correct.
That's what I always think of. So I go like,
Okay, so that was where it started, and that's so again, and because TrevorNoah, and in the piece I wrote that's in the show description around how around his memoir and his deployment of mixed race colorism within as a it's very liberal counterinsurgent. In this whole chastising of Black America. As he did in the New York Times piece some years ago, basically saying you don't know racism because you didn't come from South Africa. It's crazy. So to sit there and not even know that Milton Friedman is dead is just, I think, just says a lot. It just says a lot. All right, I think that's basically it. I think that's it. Anybody got any comments, questions, queries, conundrums, catechisms, cacophony, calumny, consternation, condemnation? Okay, we finally agree on something. Yeah. MiltonFriedman, you could say he's an economic social Darwinist. I think that works. Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, this is even a better point from August 3rd. Lenin wrote Imperialism in 1917. So how can it start with MiltonFriedman? Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Castigation. That's a good one. That's a good one. Liberal Joe Rogan. Don't fall for it. What am I falling for? Don't fall for what? Oh, shout out to Cynical, member for 4 months. Thank you very much. Noah helping a white to rehabilitate capitalism. He sure was. You hear that a lot in certain spaces, by the way. It's not capitalism is it's not capitalism's not the problem. It's this one. What's up, Quaker Anarchist? Was your award a possible attempt at subverting you, a nod your growing success reaching people? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I've actually thought a lot about that. I think here's a little teaser for my Patreon or my and the channel members only stuff. If you watch my explanation of how and why I'm a full professor, I think that says a lot about how and why I got that Freedom Scholar Award. I do think it was a kind of glitch in the matrix. I mean, I think it's like with, probably with a lot of people, there's certainly with me, there's not no support, just not a welcomed, sort of broadly welcomed support. So there was sort of so I don't know that there was some sort of plan there. I do think I have it under good authority that the year after I got it, they changed the rules to make it so that you have to be affiliated with a university, because there may or may not, I can neither confirm nor deny, may or may not have been attempts to get the award distributed to some other folks. I don't know, but I don't think you need an award to subvert me. I think in many ways me and others are subverted in somewhat in the same ways that we're talking about tonight, in other instances. So we're subverted in the ways that certain artists are subverted in the music industry, just simply by promoting others. It's not even a direct assault on me or anyone else. You just promote other forms of scholarship and media production and whatever. I think that I've never tried to be part of the mainstream academy and have not performed as someone who wants to be in the mainstream academy. I think I have to be honest and say that I've you could argue I've subverted myself. But no, I don't think they would have needed to do that. I really don't know. I still struggle with how that all happened, but I don't think it was some sort of, I think it was just, again, a kind of a happy accident. As I said to somebody else today, it was just kind of a couple people said, he deserves it. And the others that disagreed were just maybe not, I don't know. I honestly don't know. So yeah, I am. So I'm not. I never. I don't know if I'm throwing intellectual hands tomorrow. I will be at Busboys at 14th and V tomorrow in DC. The only thing I know I'm going to do is make the point that I got some leftover books and I'm going to give them away to people who are in attendance. Making the point that since Busboys would not sell the book or carry the book, you in attendance get a copy for free. But that's about it. So Why do I sound like Chappelle? If I do, it's because I've been watching him for years, and maybe it just was an unconscious attempt to do what he does. I don't know. You're right. This bad capitalism stuff does deserve its own kind of special attention. The Freedom Scholars Award that I got a couple of years ago. And you know, I didn't get some of what I had hoped would be. I didn't get to. It didn't have. It didn't hit the way I had hoped it would hit. The money, of course, is nice, but the immaterial punch that I was hoping it would have, I got out hated again. Really. You know, and to that point, the money I got is pennies compared to. First of all, I wasn't sharing any of it with the university, so they didn't care about that. But the other part of it was that it's pennies compared to what others that I even presided over, some who are going up for tenure and promotion, they're bringing in way more money through grants and whatnot to the university. I hope they get a little bit. They should get a little bit of a cut of that, but the university. So from the university's perspective, and this is again my point about the subversion part, from certainly those within the academy, it's easy to undercut anything I'm doing because I don't bring in anything like that or anything. I don't do that stuff. So the university was happy to not acknowledge the award. I thought they were going to be forced to, and they were happy to they were. It was easy for them not to. Kenyatta, thanks for the super chat. Came in late, so I have to go check out the Chappelle segment. Thanks. Hey, I appreciate it, Kenyatta. It wasn't that deep. But I appreciate that you willing to go back and check it out. Let's see. Jab, someone asked about reading recommendations on the creation of genres. Oh man, it's been a minute. To be perfectly honest, so some of my work would need to be updated, which is why I wanted to see that Fantano interview, and maybe eventually I'll get a copy of her book. But I would suggest reading her book. I forgot the name of it, but go back and I'll put the link to the interview in the show description, or just go back and see where I start that, and you can see where I call out her name. I would also suggest go to imixwhatilike.org to the book section and get a free copy of I Mix What I Like, and just go through the footnotes. Because up until, it's like 15 years old now, some of the sources, but in terms of the history, there's some classics that talk about this in there that I cite in there. Hitmen comes to mind. I don't remember exactly where I'm getting it, but that might have been it. There's a number of books. I mean, I was very caught up with the literature at the time I published that book. So I would encourage you to check that. And then what has come out between 2011 and now, I would probably need help in updating myself. But the histories are pretty clear on that. Any history of the music industry is likely going to tell you something about the creation of genres. They might not say it in exactly the way I'm saying it, but the point is pretty clear. It was about dividing up music and races, by the way. I mean, they would literally have race music so that the whites knew not to buy that Negro stuff, which was, I think, the initial attempt. And then eventually it was, because the goal, of course, is Greg Tate, Everything But the Burden. I don't remember exactly if this point is made there, but that book is just so good that it I'm sure is that, the goal was to have white people performing blackness. So you put the black music and the actual black music somewhere else so that Elvis and whoever else can have a career. The playlist itself is in payola itself have connections to race and segregation. Dick Clark got away with payola because he was not only owning a record label and paying his own artists to be on American Bandstand, but he was not having black artists play to white audiences. And the dude, Alan, what was his name? The one that they destroyed his career for payola was at the same time they targeted him was because he had integrated settings. So they used the illegality of payola to destroy him and let Dick Clark keep going forever. So anyway, but yeah, I would, check some of that out, and then we can all look for what is updated. Oh wow, I'm verbose. Okay. I don't know if he would be able to condense it down. You might be right about that. I don't even know what you were talking about, but I just, I'm drawn to the hate. They actually declined to sell what? What did I miss? Oh wow, you saw Chappelle in the 90s. All right. Let's see. What are we talking about here? Better job of critiquing what? Damn, I'm missing too many things. What was the critique Dr. Brown was offering? Oh man, I'm missing. I think I'm just late on stuff here. It's all love. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, it's all good. Alan Freed. Thank you, Lady Alex. That's right. Alan Freed was his name. They destroyed him because he had black artists actually performing to white crowds. In fact, I can start over. All you have to do is drag the the cursor back to the beginning. Uh-oh. They hating on Afro pessimism again. Does Layla Brown get into that on Black Miss? Is that what you all were saying? Damn, I missed. I think I was just all out of order there. Yeah. I told Renee that be careful getting into the Afro pessimism. Folks can get upset. Folks can get upset with you. You got to be careful. So, you know what? There was one other thing. Let me just go ahead. You know what? Let me do one. There was one other thing that I didn't. You know what? I think I'm gonna save it. I'm getting a little tired. Let me save it. It's just some wild buying power stuff. It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, the buying power stuff is wild. But I'm starting to get a little tired. It's already past my bedtime. Saturday mid-evening live. I like to think and work with it too, but is Yeah, I'm looking forward to this too. Mtume, dude is sharp, man. And he knows movies. And I gotta be careful. I do get caught up sometimes. So we'll see if he can convince me. It is past my bedtime. I don't know what I'm doing up this late, but this is fun. I do enjoy this, and you know, to my man's point here.
Everybody, shut the hell up. It's a lot that I got to get off my chest right now. It's a lot. Shut up. All right?
So, you know, I would never tell anybody to shut up, but that is how I feel. Like, let me get some stuff off my chest. So I appreciate it. And I am verbose. But all right, listen, good people, I appreciate you coming through. Please do all the things. And I will see you, some of you. I don't know if anybody's going to be out there tomorrow at Bus Boys in DC. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you Monday morning. Got Orasami Burton coming through at minimum. So you already know it's going to be at minimum dope. And over there on Black Liberation Media, of course. And yeah, this has been fun. Thank you all very much. And peace only if you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say, as always. And I will catch you next time here at
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
And what do you sacrifice?
Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, that set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything, 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 everything.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.